Alex Carter lived a quiet, unassuming life in the small town of Willow Creek, Texas. He was a carpenter by trade, known around town for his gentle nature and willingness to help anyone in need. His workshop, nestled behind his modest wooden cabin, was filled with handmade furniture, old tools, and the faint scent of pine wood. Despite living alone, Alex never seemed lonely. His days were filled with work, and his evenings were spent reading old books or fixing things for the neighbors. One stormy afternoon, the rain came down in torrents, pounding against the tin roof of his cabin. The wind howled through the trees, and thunder rumbled in the distance. Alex stood by his window, watching the rain streak down the glass, when suddenly, something unusual caught his eye. On the muddy road leading to his cabin, a small figure was stumbling through the rain. Alex squinted, trying to see clearly through the curtain of water. It was a child, no more than 4 or 5 years old, clutching something to her chest, her clothes soaked and covered in mud. Without a second thought, Alex grabbed his raincoat, pulled on his boots, and rushed outside. The rain was icy and sharp, but he pushed through, his boots sinking into the mud with each step. As he approached, he saw the little girl huddled under a tree, shivering and hugging a worn-out teddy bear. Her blonde curls were plastered to her cheeks, and her blue eyes, wide with fear, met his. "Hey there, sweetheart," Alex called out gently, squatting down to her eye level. "Are you lost?" The little girl didn't answer. She only stared at him, her tiny hands gripping the teddy bear tighter. Alex noticed the bear's ear was frayed, the stitching coming loose. He softened his voice. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. Are you alone?" Her lip quivered, and finally, she nodded. Alex's heart clenched. He looked around, but there was no one in sight.
"Nos cars, nos parents câlinent leur name, juste the hand Lorrain."
"Come on, let's get you out of this rain," he said, offering his hand. She hesitated for a moment before placing her tiny hand in his. It was cold and wet, but she held on tightly. Alex led her back to his cabin, moving slowly so she wouldn't slip in the mud. He opened the door and ushered her inside, the warmth of the cabin washing over them. "There we go. Let's get you warm." He took off her wet coat and wrapped her in a thick woolen blanket from his armchair. Her small frame almost disappeared under its folds, but her eyes peeked out, still wide with curiosity and fear. Alex moved to the kitchen and put on a kettle of water. "Would you like some hot chocolate?" he asked.
The girl hésitated before nodding slightly.
Alex smiled and set about making the drink, his hands moving deftly as he warmed the milk and mixed in the cocoa powder. He brought the steaming mug over to her, watching as she cupped it with both hands, her tiny fingers barely wrapping around its surface. She sipped carefully, her eyes never leaving him. After a few moments of silence, Alex pulled up a chair and sat across from her. "My name is Alex. What's yours?" The little girl stared at him, her lips pressed tightly together. Alex waited patiently, his expression kind and gentle. Finally, she whispered, "Lily." Alex smiled warmly. "That's a beautiful name, Lily.
"Do you know where your parents are?"
Her eyes grew wet, and she shook her head. Alex's heart ached at the sight. "It's okay," he soothed. "We'll figure it out. But for now, you're safe here." Over the next hour, Alex tried asking gentle questions, but Lily remained mostly silent. She answered only with nods or shakes of her head. All he could gather was that she didn't know where she came from or how she ended up wandering alone in the storm. Her little hands never let go of the teddy bear, clutching it as if it were her only lifeline. As evening approached, Alex prepared a simple dinner, warm soup and fresh bread. He set the table, and Lily ate quietly, glancing up at him occasionally with wide, curious eyes. Alex didn't push her to speak. He simply stayed nearby, making sure she was comfortable. That night, he made up a small bed for her in the guest room. He tucked her in, pulling the blanket up to her chin. She looked up at him, her expression softening. "Good night, Lily," he whispered, turning off the lamp. "Good night," she murmured back, her voice barely audible. Alex closed the door gently, leaning against it for a moment as he exhaled deeply. His mind swirled with questions. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why was she alone in the rain? But despite the uncertainty, one thing was clear: he would protect her, no matter what. As the rain continued to fall outside, Alex sat by the fireplace, staring into the flickering flames. His life had always been simple and quiet, but now with the arrival of Lily, everything had changed. He didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to let her face them alone. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The small town of Willow Creek soon grew accustomed to the sight of Alex Carter with a little blonde-haired girl by his side. It seemed as if Lily had always been part of his life. She followed him everywhere, into the dusty old workshop where he carved wooden chairs and fixed cabinets, to the farmer's market where he sold his handmade furniture, and even to the local diner where they shared pancakes every Sunday morning. At first, the townsfolk were curious. Where did she come from? Is she his daughter? Questions circulated, but Alex only smiled and shrugged. Just found her, he would say simply. And she found me. Eventually, people stopped asking. To them, Lily was now little Lily of Willow Creek, always smiling, always holding that worn-out teddy bear. Alex had never been a father before, but instinctively, he knew how to care for her. He learned how to braid her hair, a skill that took him countless YouTube tutorials and more than a few tangled disasters. He made sure her tiny shoes were tied, her dresses were clean, and every night before bed, he read her stories from old books he had kept on dusty shelves. Lily, in turn, flourished under Alex's care. She began to laugh more, her cheeks growing rosier each day. She would giggle uncontrollably when Alex lifted her onto his shoulders, allowing her to pick apples from the old tree behind their cabin. Her favorite game was hide and seek in his cluttered workshop, where she would bury herself under piles of sawdust and old tarps, squealing with delight when he finally found her. One autumn afternoon, as the leaves turned gold and crimson, Alex decided it was time to teach Lily how to ride a bike. He had found a second-hand bicycle at a garage sale and spent hours fixing it up, painting it a bright cherry red and attaching a small basket to the front. "What do you think, kiddo?" he asked, wheeling it out onto the porch. Lily's eyes grew wide with excitement. Is it mine?" Alex chuckled. "All yours. But first, you gotta learn how to ride it." He spent the entire afternoon running alongside her, holding onto the back of the seat as she wobbled and swayed. Lily shrieked and giggled, her laughter echoing through the trees. Finally, after countless attempts and a few scraped knees, she managed to glide down the dirt path on her own, her golden curls bouncing with each pedal. "I'm doing it. I'm really doing it," she shouted back at him. Alex watched her, hands on his hips, pride swelling in his chest. "That's my girl," he yelled back, clapping his hands. Their life settled into a beautiful routine. Every morning, Alex would make breakfast, pancakes or scrambled eggs, while Lily colored in her sketchbooks. They would then spend the day working in the shop, taking breaks to play tag or go for long walks by the creek. At night, Alex would tuck her in, and Lily would whisper "Good night, Daddy," before drifting off to sleep. It was the first time she called him that, Daddy. Alex remembered it like it was yesterday. He had been sitting by her bedside, reading from an old fairy tale book. Her eyes were drooping, her little fingers clutching the edge of her blanket. As he closed the book and leaned over to turn off the lamp, she had murmured it, soft as a feather. "Good night, Daddy." He froze, his heart thudding loudly in his chest. He looked down, thinking she might have been talking in her sleep, but her eyes were half open, gazing up at him with a sleepy smile. "Did you just call me Daddy?" he whispered. Lily nodded, her eyes closing fully this time. "You're my daddy now," she mumbled, before drifting off completely. Alex sat there for what felt like hours, the word echoing in his mind. Daddy. He hadn't known how much he needed to hear it until that moment. He leaned over, kissed her forehead gently, and whispered back, "Good night, my little girl." From that day on, she called him Daddy. To Alex, it was a title greater than any he could have ever imagined. It meant he was her protector, her caretaker, her family. And to Lily, Alex was her entire world. But despite the happiness they shared, Alex couldn't shake the nagging feeling at the back of his mind. He had asked around town, called local authorities, even posted notices at the sheriff's station about a missing girl, but no one had come forward. No parents, no relatives, just silence. He had even taken her to the town clinic for a checkup. The doctor had asked a few questions, taken some notes, and simply nodded, saying she seemed healthy, if a little underweight. Alex wasn't sure whether to be relieved or more worried. He had nightmares sometimes, visions of someone coming to take her away, of strangers with legal papers knocking on his door. Each morning, he would wake up and look at her sleeping peacefully, and the dread would slowly melt away. In his heart, Alex knew that his time with Lily might not be permanent. But every day he woke up and saw her smile, he silently promised her that he would protect her, no matter what. One evening, as they sat by the fire roasting marshmallows, Lily looked up at him with her big, curious eyes. "Daddy, do you think my real parents are looking for me?" Alex's heart clenched, but he kept his face steady. "I'm sure they are, sweetheart. I'm sure they are." Lily nodded thoughtfully, popping a toasted marshmallow into her mouth. "But I don't want to go anywhere. I want to stay here, with you." Alex swallowed hard, the crackling fire casting shadows across his face. He reached over and pulled her into his lap. "You don't have to go anywhere," he whispered. "Not unless you want to." Lily nestled into his arms, sighing with contentment. Alex stared into the flames, his jaw clenched. He knew that this peace, this happiness, they were fragile. But he would fight for it. He would fight for her. And deep down, Alex knew that their story was only just beginning. It was a crisp autumn morning when everything began to change. The leaves outside Alex's cabin had turned shades of amber and crimson, crunching beneath his boots as he carried firewood inside. Lily was at the kitchen table, scribbling with colored pencils, her tongue poking out in concentration. Alex chuckled, placing the wood beside the fireplace. "Whatcha drawing, kiddo?" he asked, brushing the wood dust from his hands. Lily beamed up at him. "It's you and me," she exclaimed proudly, holding up the paper. Alex looked at the sketch, a stick figure with big wavy hair holding hands with a smaller stick figure, both standing under a giant sun. Above them, she had written "Daddy and me" in big, uneven letters. Alex's heart swelled. He knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," he said softly. "I love it." Just then, there was a sharp knock at the door. Alex's smile faded, and his eyes flickered with worry. People hardly ever came this far out unless they needed help or were lost. He rose to his feet and approached the door cautiously. When he opened it, Sheriff Tom Mitchell stood on the porch, his wide-brimmed hat pulled low and hands tucked into his belt. His expression was serious. "Morning, Alex," Tom greeted, nodding politely. "Morning, Sheriff. Everything all right?" Alex asked, stepping aside to let the sheriff in. Tom glanced past Alex to where Lily sat at the table, still scribbling, oblivious to the visitor. He lowered his voice. "Mind if we talk outside for a minute?" Alex's stomach tightened. He glanced back at Lily, who waved happily. "I'll be right back, Lily," he called, forcing a smile. She waved back with her tiny hand. Outside, the wind was brisk and sharp, carrying the scent of pine. Tom cleared his throat. "Alex, I got a call from the state authorities yesterday," he began slowly, his voice grave. "They've been investigating a missing persons case, a little girl named Emily White." The name hit Alex like a punch to the chest. He blinked, processing. "Emily White?" he repeated. Tom nodded, pulling out a worn photograph from his jacket pocket. "This was sent over from New York. The Whites are a big name up there, real estate, business tycoons. Their daughter went missing almost 3 years ago. They've been searching for her ever since." He handed the photo to Alex, whose hands shook slightly as he took it. The image showed a young girl with blonde curls, bright blue eyes, and a smile so familiar it made his heart lurch. It was unmistakably Lily. Alex's breath caught in his throat. That can't be," he stammered. Tom's expression softened. "I know this is hard to believe, Alex. But look at her. That's Lily, or Emily, I guess. I had the photo sent to the clinic where you took her a few months ago. They ran a check, and it matches. It's her." Alex felt the ground sway beneath his feet. He leaned against the porch railing, the photograph still clutched in his hands. "So, what happens now?" he asked quietly. Tom took a deep breath. "The White family was contacted. They want to come down here. They want to meet her, and bring her back home." Alex's grip on the railing tightened. His knuckles turned white. "No," he whispered, almost to himself. "She's my daughter. I raised her. She's mine." Tom placed a firm hand on Alex's shoulder. "I know you love her, Alex. Everyone in town knows that. But she has a family out there, a mother and father who have been searching for her for years. This is going to happen. It's just a matter of how." Alex turned away, his gaze fixed on the cabin window. Through the glass, he could see Lily giggling as she continued to draw, her tiny hands covered in crayon marks. His heart clenched painfully. "How long do I have?" he asked, his voice cracking. Tom sighed. "They'll be here by the end of the week." Without another word, the sheriff tipped his hat and walked back down the gravel path to his patrol car. Alex stood there long after the car disappeared, the photograph still crumpled in his hand. When he finally stepped back inside, Lily looked up at him with bright eyes. "Daddy. Look, I finished the drawing," she announced, holding it up proudly. Alex forced a smile, his heart breaking. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," he said softly, moving to sit beside her. She crawled into his lap, resting her head against his chest, oblivious to the storm that was coming. That night, Alex lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His mind was a tangle of thoughts, desperation, fear, and most of all, love. He couldn't lose her. He just couldn't. But how could he fight against a family like the Whites? They had power, influence, and most of all, they had the law on their side. For 3 years, they had searched for their daughter. How could he stand in the way of that? But then he would think of Lily's laughter, her tiny hand gripping his as they walked to the farmer's market, the way she called him daddy with such pure innocence. She was his world now. And he was hers. He rose from his bed, walked quietly to her room, and opened the door. Lily was fast asleep, her teddy bear tucked under her arm. Alex knelt beside her, brushing a stray curl from her face. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. "Don't worry, kiddo," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm not letting you go without a fight." The shadows danced on the walls as he sat there, unmoving, the weight of the truth pressing down on him. Somewhere out there, a family was coming for her. A family with money, power, and every right to take her back. But Alex had something else. He had love, and he had Lily's heart. As dawn began to break over the horizon, casting soft light through the window, Alex made up his mind. He wasn't going to lose her. Not now. Not ever. The day arrived faster than Alex could have imagined. The morning sun cast long shadows over the quiet streets of Willow Creek, painting the leaves with hues of gold and amber. Alex stood on his porch, hands in his pockets, his gaze fixed on the winding dirt road that led into town. His heart pounded in his chest with a steady, unyielding rhythm. Inside the cabin, Lily was humming to herself, completely unaware of what was about to happen. She sat at the kitchen table, drawing colorful pictures of butterflies and flowers with her usual sense of joy. Alex couldn't bring himself to tell her. How could he explain that today, strangers would come to take her away? That she would be torn from the only home she remembered? At exactly 10 a.m., the sound of engines broke the stillness. Alex's jaw tightened as 2 black SUVs appeared around the bend, gliding smoothly over the gravel path. Dust swirled in their wake, settling slowly as the cars came to a stop in front of his cabin. The doors opened, and 2 figures stepped out. The first was a tall man in a tailored suit, his hair slicked back with precision. He exuded authority, his posture straight and unyielding. Beside him stood a woman dressed in an elegant coat, her blonde hair neatly styled, her eyes hidden behind large sunglasses. Even from a distance, Alex could see her hands shaking. They were David and Catherine White, Lily's biological parents. Sheriff Tom Mitchell followed shortly behind, stepping out of his patrol car with a nod toward Alex. His expression was solemn, as if he too felt the weight of what was about to happen. David White approached first, his gaze steady and calculating. He extended a hand toward Alex. "Mr. Carter, I presume?" Alex took a moment, then accepted the handshake. "That's right." His voice was rough, steadying itself against the tremor in his hands. David's eyes shifted toward the cabin. Is she inside?" Alex swallowed hard. He glanced back at the window, where Lily's small face was now peeking out, her eyes wide with curiosity. She waved, and Alex forced a smile, lifting his hand to wave back. "Yes," Alex replied finally. "She's inside." Catherine stepped forward then, her sunglasses removed to reveal eyes that shimmered with tears. Her hands clutched a small handkerchief, knuckles white with tension. Can I see her?" she whispered, her voice cracking. Alex hesitated, every fiber of his being wanting to scream no, to shut the door and keep Lily safe in his arms forever. But he knew that wasn't possible. He nodded slowly. "Yes, come inside." He led them up the porch steps, his boots heavy against the wood. He opened the door, and Lily looked up from her drawings, her smile bright and innocent. "Daddy, who are they?" she asked, her voice soft and curious. Catherine gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Tears spilled over her cheeks as she took a step forward.
Émilie. Chibretted, her voice barely above a whisper. Lily blinked, confused.
"My name is Lily," she replied, glancing back at Alex. David's expression tightened, but Catherine only shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Emily, my sweet Emily," she repeated, moving closer, her hands reaching out. Lily recoiled slightly, stepping back toward Alex, clutching his leg. "Daddy," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear.
Alex chattered.
He knelt down beside her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder.
"It's okay, sweetheart.
They're here to see you." Lily looked back at Catherine and David, her grip on Alex's shirt tightening. "Why are they crying?" she asked innocently. Catherine couldn't hold back anymore. She moved forward, dropping to her knees, her eyes level with Lily's. Her voice was thick with emotion. "Because we've missed you so much," she sobbed, reaching out a trembling hand.
"I'm your mommy."
Lily looked up at Alex, confusion written across her tiny face. "But, my mommy is in heaven," she whispered. Alex felt his throat tighten, his vision blurring. He squeezed her shoulder gently. "They've been looking for you for a long time, Lily. They're your real family." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "But, I want to stay with you." Catherine's sobs grew louder, and David stepped forward, placing a hand on his wife's shoulder. His expression was firm but not unkind. "Emily, Lily, we're here to bring you home." The word hung heavy in the room, home. To Lily, home was this cabin, these walls, and Alex's arms. To David and Catherine, home was a penthouse in New York, filled with luxuries she couldn't even begin to imagine. Lily shook her head. "No. I want to stay with Daddy." Her voice cracked, and she buried her face in Alex's chest. Catherine's sobs grew softer, her shoulders shaking. David's jaw clenched, and Sheriff Tom stepped forward, clearing his throat. "We have to do this the right way, folks. There's legal paperwork. We have to proceed properly." Catherine looked up, her eyes pleading. "Can we just spend some time with her? Please?" Alex hesitated, his hands still resting protectively on Lily's back. He looked into her eyes, those blue eyes filled with confusion and fear, and he knew that no matter what happened, she needed to know where she came from. She needed to understand. He took a deep breath. "All right," he said finally, his voice shaking. "But it has to be slow."
She doesn't remember anything.
David nodded, extending his hand once more. "Thank you, Mr. Carter. I know this isn't easy." Alex stared at the hand for a moment, then took it, his grip firm.
"You're right.
It isn't." Catherine moved closer, her hands still trembling. "Emily, Lily," she whispered softly, brushing a stray curl from her cheek.
"Can I show you something?"
"I brought some pictures, of when you were little." Lily looked up at Alex, her eyes wide and questioning. He nodded gently. "It's okay, kiddo." Reluctantly, Lily took Catherine's hand, moving slowly toward the leather-bound photo album that Catherine held. She flipped it open, revealing images of a happy, giggling baby with blonde curls and big blue eyes. Pictures of her in a crib, learning to walk, her first birthday cake smeared across her cheeks. Lily stared, her small hand reaching out to touch the images. Is that me?" she whispered. Catherine smiled through her tears.
"Yes, sweetheart.
"That's you." Lily looked back at Alex, her eyes searching. He gave her a nod, his heart breaking with every second that passed. "Yes, Lily. That's you." The next morning, Alex woke up with a weight in his chest that felt heavier than any load of lumber he had ever carried. He moved quietly through the house, careful not to wake Lily, who was still fast asleep in her room, clutching her worn-out teddy bear as if it were a lifeline. Her tiny face was calm, peaceful, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around her. Alex poured himself a cup of coffee and stared out the kitchen window, watching the sun rise over the trees. He knew it wouldn't be long before they came back. Catherine's tear-streaked face and David's stern resolve were fresh in his mind. They weren't going to just walk away. He couldn't blame them. If she were his flesh and blood, he wouldn't either. The knock came just as the clock struck 9. Alex set his mug down and moved to the door, bracing himself. When he opened it, David White stood there, flanked by Catherine and Sheriff Tom Mitchell. They weren't dressed as formally this time. Catherine wore a simple cardigan, her blonde hair tied back, and David had on a plain jacket and jeans. It made them look less intimidating, almost ordinary. "Mr. Carter," David began, his voice steady but less imposing than before. "May we come in?" Alex hesitated but stepped aside, opening the door wider. "Of course." They filed in quietly, Catherine looking around the small, cozy cabin with a mixture of curiosity and sadness. Her eyes landed on the collection of Lily's drawings pinned to the refrigerator, stick figures, hearts, flowers, and the words Daddy and Me scrawled in crayon. Catherine covered her mouth, stifling a sob. "Can I get you something? Coffee?"
There.
Alex asked awkwardly. "No thank you," David replied, glancing at Catherine before continuing. "We wanted to talk to you, about Emily." "Lily," Alex corrected automatically, his tone firm but not unkind. David's expression softened. "Lily," he repeated. "I understand that's who she is to you." Alex crossed his arms over his chest, leaning against the edge of the kitchen counter. "What is it you want to say?" Catherine stepped forward, her eyes pleading. "We saw how she looked at you yesterday. How she clung to you. She loves you." Her voice broke slightly, and she composed herself. "I don't want to just rip her away. She's been with you for so long, we understand that it would be traumatizing." Alex's jaw clenched. He didn't speak, just waited. David cleared his throat. "Catherine and I talked last night. We don't want to cause her pain. We want what's best for her." He paused, his gaze steady. "So we have a proposal." Alex's eyes narrowed. "What kind of proposal?" Catherine took a deep breath. "We want you to come with us. To New York. Stay with her while she transitions. Help her adjust." The words hung heavy in the air, thick with implications. Alex blinked, certain he hadn't heard her correctly. You want me to come to New York?" he asked, incredulous. David nodded. "Yes. Just until she gets comfortable. You're her security right now, and we don't want to take that away." Alex looked between them, trying to gauge their sincerity. Catherine stepped forward, her hands clasped together. "I know it's a lot to ask, and I can't imagine how difficult this is for you. But I saw how she looked at you, Mr. Carter. She calls you Daddy." Her voice cracked. "And I don't want her to suffer because of us." Alex swallowed hard, the room feeling suddenly smaller. "And what happens after?" he asked quietly. David and Catherine exchanged a glance. Finally, David spoke. "We take it step by step. We're not asking you to leave her behind forever. Just, help us help her. She's our daughter, but she's your family too. We see that now." Alex's hands fell to his sides, his shoulders slumping slightly. He had prepared for a fight, for legal battles, for a brutal separation. But this was different. This was something he hadn't anticipated. "What about my job? My house?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. David straightened his posture. "We'll handle it. Your job will be secure when you come back. As for your house, we'll make sure it's taken care of. You have my word." Alex rubbed his temples, exhaling slowly. His mind spun with questions and doubts, but above all he thought of Lily, her smile, her laughter, the way she clung to him each night before bed. He couldn't bear the thought of her crying out for him and him not being there. Catherine stepped closer, her eyes red-rimmed but determined. "Please," she whispered. "I need her to be okay. And I know that means you have to be there too." Alex stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay," he agreed finally, his voice steady. "I'll do it. For her." Catherine's breath hitched, and she reached out, grabbing his hands. "Thank you. Thank you so much." David extended his hand, and Alex took it. The handshake was firm, resolute. "We leave in 3 days," David said. "I'll make the arrangements." Alex nodded, his eyes drifting back to the living room where Lily's drawings decorated every surface. He felt a mixture of hope and dread twisting in his gut. New York. A world away from everything he knew. But if it meant staying with Lily, if it meant keeping her safe, he would do it. After a few more words, David and Catherine left, Sheriff Tom nodding respectfully as they passed. Alex stood on the porch for a long time, watching the dust settle after their cars disappeared around the bend. When he finally stepped back inside, Lily ran up to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Daddy, who were those people?" Alex knelt down, brushing a hand through her golden curls. He took a deep breath, looking into her bright blue eyes. They're friends, sweetheart. And we're going to go on a little trip. To a big city. How does that sound?" Lily's eyes sparkled with excitement. "A trip? Can we take Mr. Teddy?" Alex laughed, the sound shaky but real. "Of course we can. Mr. Teddy goes wherever you go." Lily beamed, skipping back to her coloring books. Alex watched her for a moment, his heart full and heavy. The world was about to change, and he would follow her anywhere, even to the towering heights of New York City. 3 days later, the sound of jet engines roared above the clouds as Alex and Lily made their way to New York City. It was Lily's first time on an airplane, and her wide blue eyes sparkled with wonder as she pressed her face against the window. "Look, Daddy. The clouds are like big cotton balls," she exclaimed, her tiny hands leaving smudges on the glass. Alex chuckled, though his grip on the armrest was tight. Flying wasn't something he'd ever done before. In fact, the last time he'd been more than 100 miles from Willow Creek was when he served a short stint in the army as a young man. Now he was thousands of feet in the air, leaving behind everything familiar for the unknown, all for Lily. The flight landed smoothly, and they were met at the gate by Catherine and David White. Catherine rushed forward, her eyes bright with excitement. "Emily," she called out, her voice breaking slightly. Lily turned, blinking in surprise. She still hadn't fully understood that Catherine and David were her biological parents. To her, they were still just kind visitors from Texas. "Hi," she replied shyly, clutching Alex's hand tightly. David stepped forward, extending his hand to Alex. "Good to see you, Mr. Carter. I trust the flight was comfortable." Alex nodded, his hand enveloped in David's firm grip. "First time flying," he admitted. "Wasn't too bad." David smiled politely. "Welcome to New York." Outside the airport, a sleek black limousine waited, its polished surface gleaming under the city lights. Alex's eyes widened as a driver stepped out, opening the back door with a professional nod. He glanced down at Lily, who was staring with equal awe. "Daddy, is that for us?" she whispered. Catherine laughed softly. "Yes, sweetheart. It's for all of us. Come on." They climbed inside, Alex feeling out of place amidst the leather seats and tinted windows. Lily bounced on the plush cushion, her eyes wide as they pulled away from the curb and entered the bustling streets of Manhattan. Tall buildings scraped the sky, flashing lights blinked from every corner, and cars honked in a chaotic symphony. Alex had never seen anything like it. Back in Willow Creek, the tallest building was the water tower, and traffic jams only happened during parades. Here, everything moved faster, brighter, louder. "Daddy, look." Lily cried, pointing out the window. "There's a giant TV on that building." Alex squinted, realizing she was pointing at Times Square. Huge digital billboards displayed advertisements, news updates, and music videos, lighting up the streets even in broad daylight. "Wow," he murmured, shaking his head. Catherine turned to them with a smile. "We're almost home." The limousine turned down a quieter street lined with trees and iron gates. They passed elegant brownstones and luxurious apartment buildings before finally pulling up to a towering structure of glass and steel. A doorman in a crisp uniform opened the door, greeting them with a polite nod. "Welcome back, Mrs. White. Mr. White." They stepped out, and Alex stared up at the building that seemed to pierce the clouds. Catherine gently touched his arm. "It's a lot to take in, I know. But you'll get used to it." David led them through a grand marble lobby with high ceilings and sparkling chandeliers. Alex could hear his boots clicking against the polished floor, echoing in the vast space. They stepped into an elevator, and David pressed the button for the top floor. The ride up was smooth and silent, the city shrinking beneath them as they climbed higher and higher. When the elevator doors slid open, they stepped into the penthouse. Alex's breath caught in his throat. The walls were lined with windows that stretched from floor to ceiling, offering a panoramic view of New York City. Polished hardwood floors gleamed under the light of crystal chandeliers, and modern furniture filled the space with a blend of elegance and warmth. "Whoa," Lily whispered, her eyes wide. Is this your house?"
Catherine knelt down beside her, smiling.
"It's your house too, sweetheart." Lily looked back at Alex, her face a mixture of wonder and confusion. "Do we live here now?" Alex swallowed hard. "For a while, kiddo." Catherine reached out, offering her hand. "Emily, would you like to see your room?" Lily hesitated, glancing back at Alex. He nodded gently, urging her forward. "Go on. I'll be right here." Reluctantly, Lily took Catherine's hand, and they disappeared down the long hallway. Alex stood awkwardly in the middle of the living room, his hands shoved into his pockets. David joined him, nodding approvingly. "Quite the view, isn't it?" Alex exhaled slowly. "Yeah, it sure is." David stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I appreciate you agreeing to this, Mr. Carter. I know it wasn't easy." Alex kept his eyes on the skyline. "I'm not doing this for you." David's smile tightened, but he nodded. "Of course." He paused, hands clasped behind his back. "We've arranged for you to stay here as well. There's a guest suite just down the hall. I hope it's comfortable enough." Alex turned to him, his eyes hard. "As long as I'm near her, that's all that matters." David seemed to consider this for a moment, then extended his hand once more. "I think in time, this will all work out for the best." Alex looked at the hand, hesitated, then shook it firmly. "We'll see." Just then, Catherine returned with Lily skipping beside her, a bright smile lighting up her face. "Daddy, you have to see my room. It's huge. And there's a big window, and I can see everything." Alex's heart softened, and he knelt down to her level. "Yeah? Well, show me." Lily grabbed his hand and tugged him down the hallway, her laughter echoing off the marble walls. Catherine watched them go, her eyes glistening with emotion. She turned to David, her voice soft. "I think we did the right thing." David nodded slowly. "I hope so." In that moment, Alex knew that his life had changed forever. Willow Creek felt like a distant memory, but he wasn't alone. He still had Lily, and no matter what luxury or grandeur surrounded them, she was the only thing that mattered. The first few weeks in New York were a whirlwind for Alex. He had never been surrounded by so much glass and steel, never been part of such hurried footsteps and unyielding schedules. In Willow Creek, time moved like the lazy flow of the river, unrushed and gentle. Here in the heart of Manhattan, it was more like a raging current, pulling everyone along without mercy. Lily, on the other hand, seemed to adapt with the ease only a child could possess. Catherine had enrolled her in a prestigious private school just a few blocks from the penthouse. Every morning, Alex would walk her to the front gate, her tiny hand clutching his as she skipped along the sidewalk, marveling at the towering buildings and busy streets. "Daddy, look," she would exclaim, pointing at hot dog vendors or street musicians playing violins. Everything was an adventure for her. But for Alex, it was different. He attended social events with Catherine and David, gatherings filled with powerful business magnates and political figures. He quickly realized he didn't belong. At the first charity gala he attended, he had worn his only suit, a worn gray jacket that he had owned for years. The looks he received were enough to make him feel like a stray dog that had wandered into a ballroom. David had tried to smooth things over, patting him on the back and introducing him politely to colleagues, but the glances and whispered conversations were hard to ignore. "Is that the carpenter? They brought him all the way from Texas? I heard he's the one who found her. Strange, isn't it?" Alex held his head high, shaking hands and forcing a smile, but the knot in his stomach tightened with every comment. He wasn't ashamed of who he was, he had worked hard his whole life, but here in this world of tailored suits and glittering chandeliers, he felt like an outsider. One evening, after a particularly uncomfortable dinner party, Alex stood alone on the penthouse balcony, staring out at the sparkling lights of the city. The night air was cool against his face, but it did little to clear his mind. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Catherine stepping out, a soft silk shawl wrapped around her shoulders. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, her voice gentle. Alex shook his head. "Just needed some fresh air." Catherine moved to stand beside him, her gaze following his out over the city. It's a lot to take in, isn't it?
Alex chuckled softly.
That's an understatement. He hesitated before continuing. I appreciate what you've done for her. For Lily. The school, her room, she seems happy.
Catherine smiled, her eyes glimmering with tears.
She is happy. But she's happy because you're here. Alex turned to her, eyebrows raised. I'm not so sure about that. Feels like I'm just in the way most of the time. Catherine's smile faded, replaced by a look of sincerity.
You don't understand, do you?
She calls you Daddy. Not David. Not anyone else. You. Her voice grew softer.
You're her world.
Alex swallowed hard, his hands gripping the cold metal railing. I'm just trying to keep up, he admitted. I've never been around people like this. I don't fit. Catherine shook her head firmly.
You belong wherever she is.
And right now that's here. The words lingered in the air, settling in his heart. He stared out at the skyline, letting the city lights blur before him. I hope you're right, he whispered. The days that followed were a blend of highs and lows. Alex struggled with the expectations of the White family's social circle. He fumbled with forks at dinners, mispronounced names of high-profile guests, and accidentally addressed a state senator as Mr. instead of Senator. It became clear that his small-town manners were glaringly out of place. One afternoon, Catherine invited Alex to accompany her to a fundraising event at Lily's school. It was a massive glittering affair held in the grand ballroom of a five-star hotel. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above, and servers weaved through the crowd with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Alex adjusted the cuffs of his borrowed suit jacket. David had insisted he wear something more fitting, and did his best to blend in. He spotted Lily across the room, twirling in a pale blue dress as she laughed with a group of other children. The sight made him smile, his chest swelling with pride. But the peace didn't last long. As he moved through the crowd, he overheard whispers, murmurs of his past, questions of his legitimacy in their circle. Did you hear? He's just a carpenter.
Can you imagine?
Why is he even here? Surely the Whites can manage without him. I heard he's staying in the penthouse. Must be quite the charity case. Alex clenched his jaw, his hands balling into fists. He wanted to turn around, to tell them off, to shout that he belonged here because Lily was here. But he knew that wasn't how things worked in this world. So he walked away, head held high, even as his stomach churned with frustration. Later that evening, as they rode back to the penthouse, Catherine glanced over at him, her eyes searching his face. I heard what they said, she murmured gently. Alex looked out the window, the city lights reflecting off the glass. It doesn't matter, he replied, his voice low. Catherine placed a hand on his arm. Yes, it does. I know it's hard, but you need to understand. People here judge what they don't understand. Alex turned to her, his eyes steady.
I'm not going anywhere.
Not if she still needs me.
Catherine smiled softly.
I never doubted that for a second. When they reached the penthouse, Lily was already asleep, curled up with her teddy bear in her room. Alex stepped in quietly, watching her chest rise and fall in steady rhythm. He leaned down and brushed a hand through her golden curls. I'm not going anywhere, kiddo, he whispered. Not as long as you still need me. In that moment, Alex realized that this life, no matter how foreign, no matter how grand, was now his. For her. It was a brisk autumn morning in New York City. The leaves had turned shades of crimson and gold, swirling along the sidewalks as the wind blew through the towering skyscrapers. Alex stood by the window of the penthouse, sipping a cup of black coffee, his gaze drifting over the bustling streets far below. He was starting to grow accustomed to the sights and sounds of Manhattan, the honking horns, the endless rush of people, the way the city never truly slept. Behind him, he heard the soft patter of footsteps. He turned to see Lily, still rubbing the sleep from her eyes, shuffling towards him with her teddy bear clutched in her hands. Morning, Daddy, she mumbled, her voice thick with sleep. Alex smiled warmly.
Morning, sweetheart.
Did you sleep well? Lily nodded, climbing onto his lap as he settled into the armchair by the window. Together, they watched the city wake up, Lily's head resting against his chest, her small fingers playing with the frayed edges of his flannel shirt. It was moments like these that made everything worth it. Their peace was interrupted by a sharp knock on the door. Alex tensed, his hand instinctively wrapping around Lily's back protectively. He set his coffee cup down and stood, gently lifting Lily to her feet.
Stay here, all right? Et whispered.
Lily nodded, her eyes wide with curiosity. Alex made his way to the door, his footsteps heavy against the marble floor. When he opened it, he was greeted by a tall man in a charcoal gray suit, holding a leather briefcase. His expression was sharp, eyes calculating. Behind him stood two uniformed officers, their hands resting casually on their belts. "Mr. Carter?" the man asked, his voice smooth and practiced. Alex nodded slowly. "That's me. What's this about?" The man straightened his tie, offering a polite but stiff smile.
My name is Richest.
"I represent the White family's legal team. We have a court order to reassess the custody arrangement of Emily White, known to you as Lily." Alex's heart lurched. "What? I don't understand. I thought we agreed I would stay with her." Mr. Hayes raised an eyebrow. "That was a temporary arrangement. The Whites have decided to accelerate the process of integrating Emily back into their family life, which, I'm afraid, requires a more permanent solution." He gestured to the officers. "We're here to escort you to the family court downtown. The hearing is scheduled for this afternoon." Alex's fists clenched at his sides.
I'm not going anywhere.
"Lily stays with me." One of the officers stepped forward, his expression gentle but firm. "Sir, it's not a choice. We have orders to bring you in. It's best if you cooperate." From behind him, Alex heard soft footsteps. He turned to see Lily standing in the hallway, her teddy bear hanging limply from her hands. "Daddy? What's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling. Alex's heart broke at the fear in her eyes. He knelt down, pulling her into his arms.
It's okay, sweetheart.
"I'm just going to have a quick meeting. I'll be back before you know it." Catherine appeared from the hallway, her face pale but resolute. "I'll stay with her, Alex. I promise she'll be safe." Alex stared at her for a long moment, his eyes filled with a mixture of trust and desperation. He finally nodded, pressing a gentle kiss to Lily's forehead.
You be good, all right? I'll be back soon.
Lily clung to him tightly, her tiny arms wrapped around his neck. "Promise." Alex forced a smile, his throat tight. "Promise." When he finally let her go, Catherine stepped forward, scooping Lily into her arms as she watched Alex walk away with the officers. Her eyes shimmered with tears, but she held them back. "It's going to be all right, Emily," she whispered. "I promise." The ride to the courthouse was silent. Alex sat in the back of the patrol car, his hands resting on his knees. His mind raced with thoughts, memories of Willow Creek, of the first time he found Lily on that muddy road, her small hand clutching his for safety. Now that safety was slipping away, and he couldn't stop it. They arrived at the towering courthouse, its stone steps stretching up to massive glass doors. Reporters stood outside, flashing cameras and shouting questions, but Alex kept his head down, his jaw set in determination. He followed the officers through the crowd and into the building, where Richard Hayes was waiting, files neatly organized under his arm. "Right this way, Mr. Carter," Hayes instructed, leading him into a long, narrow hallway lined with wooden benches and polished marble floors. Inside the courtroom, David White sat at the front, his posture straight, his hands folded neatly on the table before him. He looked every bit the powerful businessman, calm, collected, unyielding. Catherine was beside him, her hands clenched tightly in her lap, eyes red-rimmed but determined. When Alex entered, Catherine's eyes flickered with something like regret, but David remained impassive. Alex took his seat, his hands gripping the edge of the table as the judge entered, her gavel striking with a sharp crack. "This court is now in session," she declared. "The matter of custody for Emily White will be heard." Alex's stomach twisted. He glanced back at the empty pews, imagining Lily sitting there, her eyes bright and full of trust. He couldn't let her down. Not now. Richard Hayes stood, clearing his throat. "Your Honor, the White family is requesting full and permanent custody of Emily White. They believe it is in her best interest to be returned to her biological parents, given their ability to provide for her in ways that Mr. Carter simply cannot." Alex's hands balled into fists under the table. "I'm her father," he spoke up, his voice steady. Maybe not by blood, but I've raised her. I've taken care of her. Hayes smiled politely. And we commend you for that, Mr. Carter. But it's time for Emily to be with her real family. Her biological family. The judge nodded thoughtfully, her eyes moving back and forth between Alex and the Whites. We will hear testimony from both sides before rendering a decision. Alex leaned back in his chair, his mind whirling with desperation and hope. This was his chance. He would fight. He would tell them about the nights he stayed up with her when she was sick, the mornings they spent picking apples, the bedtime stories and the whispered promises. For Lily, he would fight with everything he had. The tension in the courtroom was thick, the kind that seemed to press against your chest and steal the breath from your lungs. Alex sat at the wooden table, his hands clasped tightly together, knuckles white from the strain. Across the room, David and Catherine White sat impeccably dressed, their posture straight and unyielding. Catherine's eyes flickered with sadness, while David's expression remained firm, controlled. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair tied neatly at the back of her head, adjusted her glasses and shuffled the papers before her. We will begin with testimony from Mr. David White, she announced, her voice carrying authority. David stood, buttoned his jacket, and approached the stand with confident steps. He swore the oath, his hand steady as he repeated the words. Richard Hayes, the White family's attorney, stepped forward, his voice smooth and composed. Mr. White, Hayes began, pacing slowly, can you tell the court why you believe Emily, Lily, should be returned to your custody? David cleared his throat, his voice unwavering. Emily is our daughter. She was taken from us 3 years ago. My wife and I have spent every single day searching for her, pouring every resource we have into finding her. He paused, glancing back at Catherine, whose eyes shone with tears. We want to bring her back home, to her real family. Hayes nodded approvingly. And are you confident that you and your wife can provide her with the best care? The best education? A life full of opportunities? David's gaze was steady. Yes. We can give her everything she needs. Education, security, a safe home. We can give her the life she deserves. Hayes turned to the judge. No further questions, Your Honor. The judge nodded, glancing toward Alex. Mr. Carter, you may cross-examine. Alex stood, his boots echoing slightly on the polished floor as he approached the stand. He took a deep breath, his eyes locking with David's. Mr. White, I don't doubt you can give her a life of luxury. But can you tell me how she takes her pancakes in the morning? David blinked, caught off guard. I'm sorry. Alex took another step forward. Her pancakes. How does she like them? David shifted uncomfortably. I'm not sure. I suppose she likes them, like any child would. Alex nodded thoughtfully. She likes them with blueberries. Not on top, but mixed into the batter. And she only eats them if there's syrup, not too much, just a little. And she hates it when the butter melts before she gets to the table. There was a soft murmur in the courtroom. Alex's voice grew stronger. And at night when she's scared, she doesn't cry out for just anybody. She calls for me. She calls me Daddy. His eyes burned with conviction. Because I'm the one who's been there. I'm the one who's held her hand, tucked her in, made sure she's safe. Hayes rose abruptly. Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Carter is turning this into an emotional appeal. The judge raised her hand. Sustained. Mr. Carter, please keep your questions relevant. Alex stepped back, his jaw clenched. No further questions. He returned to his seat, his hands shaking slightly. The next few hours dragged by in a flurry of testimonies and legal arguments. Catherine took the stand, her voice shaking as she recounted the years of searching, the desperate attempts to find their daughter. Tears streamed down her face as she described Emily's nursery back in New York, untouched since the day she disappeared. When it was Alex's turn, he took the stand with steady steps. He swore the oath, his voice clear and firm. Hayes stepped forward, eyes sharp and calculating. Mr. Carter, you claim to have raised Emily as your own, despite knowing she had another family searching for her. Is that correct? Alex straightened his shoulders. I didn't know she was Emily White. To me, she was just Lily, the little girl I found on a rainy day. Hayes nodded, pacing back and forth. And you didn't think to involve the authorities sooner? To make more of an effort to find her real family? I did go to the authorities, Alex replied evenly. I called the sheriff. I put up notices. But no one came forward. Hayes stopped, turning sharply. Isn't it true, Mr. Carter, that you became attached? That you grew to see her as your own, despite knowing deep down she belonged to someone else? Alex's jaw tightened. Yes. I did grow attached. Because she needed someone. She needed a father. Hayes raised an eyebrow. But she already had a father. He gestured towards David. One who's been searching for her tirelessly. Alex looked over at David, then back at Hayes. A father isn't just someone who shares your blood. It's someone who shows up. Someone who's there when you need them. And I was there. Hayes smirked, turning to the judge. No further questions. The judge folded her hands, her gaze moving between the two sides. We will take a short recess before reconvening for closing statements. The gavel struck the block, and everyone began to rise. Alex stepped down from the stand, his legs feeling like lead. Catherine approached him, her eyes red and swollen. Alex, she whispered. I just want her to be happy. Alex met her gaze, the exhaustion clear on his face. So do I. Catherine hesitated, her hands wringing nervously. I wish it didn't have to be like this. Alex's expression softened, and for the first time since this nightmare began, he saw the mother's heart in her eyes. Me too, he whispered. The room began to clear, and Alex made his way outside, the cool air hitting his face like a splash of water. He leaned against the stone pillar, inhaling deeply, his heart pounding with every breath. The door opened behind him, and he turned to see Sheriff Tom Mitchell approaching, his hat in his hands. You did good in there, Alex. Alex shook his head. I don't know if it's enough. Tom placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. Sometimes it's not about what's enough. It's about what's right. Alex swallowed hard, his eyes fixed on the horizon. I just want her to be happy, he whispered. Tom nodded, his voice firm. Then fight for her. And in that moment, Alex knew he would. With every last breath, with every ounce of strength he had left, he would fight. Because she was his daughter, no matter what the papers said. The courtroom was silent as everyone took their seats. The judge, her expression stern but compassionate, adjusted her glasses and looked down at the stack of documents before her. Alex sat stiffly, his hands clasped tightly together, knuckles white. To his right, David and Catherine White were seated with perfect posture, their lawyer whispering final reassurances. Catherine's hands trembled slightly, resting on her lap, her gaze never leaving the judge's face. Lily was not present for the final decision. The court had agreed it would be too overwhelming for a child her age. She was waiting outside with one of the court-appointed social workers, drawing pictures in a coloring book they had brought for her. Alex had hugged her tightly before stepping inside, whispering promises that he prayed he could keep. The judge cleared her throat, and the room fell silent. I have reviewed all evidence and testimonies from both sides thoroughly. This is not an easy decision, as it involves the well-being of a child who has been loved and cared for by both parties. Alex's heart pounded so loudly he could barely hear her words. His eyes were fixed on the judge's lips, watching as each syllable formed slowly and deliberately. Mr. Carter, she began, turning her gaze towards him. It is clear to this court that you have provided a loving and nurturing environment for Emily, Lily, during her time in your care. Your dedication, compassion, and genuine love for her are undeniable. Alex swallowed hard, hope flickering in his chest. The judge's eyes softened slightly. However, she continued, her voice firm, the biological parents, Mr. and Mrs. White, have legal custody rights, and it is evident that they have the means and desire to provide her with a secure future. It is not the intention of this court to sever the bond you have built with her, but legally and ethically, the biological parents have the right to reclaim their daughter. Alex's breath caught in his throat. The room blurred around him, voices muffled and distant. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him like a mountain. Catherine let out a soft sob, her hand covering her mouth. David reached over, squeezing her hand tightly. The judge continued, her voice steady. In light of the strong connection that Lily has formed with Mr. Carter, I am issuing a transition period. For the next 6 months, she will remain under joint supervision. Lily will spend weekdays with the Whites and weekends with Mr. Carter to ensure that her adjustment is as smooth and painless as possible. Alex blinked, disbelief and relief flooding him simultaneously. Joint supervision, he echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. The judge nodded. Yes. This arrangement will be reviewed after 6 months to determine if further adjustments are necessary. This is to prioritize the child's emotional well-being and allow her time to adapt. Catherine wept openly now, tears streaming down her face. David squeezed her shoulder, his expression firm but his eyes glassy. Alex sat motionless, his mind racing to process what had just happened. He wasn't losing her, not completely. He would still get to see her, still get to be part of her life. The judge's gavel struck once, sending a sharp crack through the room. This court is adjourned. People began to shuffle out of their seats, murmurs floating through the room like the hum of distant bees. Alex sat frozen for a moment before Catherine approached him, her eyes red and swollen. Thank you, she whispered, her voice trembling. For loving her. For being there when we couldn't. Alex looked at her, exhaustion and relief mingling in his expression. I did what anyone would do. Catherine shook her head. No, not just anyone. Her gaze softened, and for the first time, Alex saw her not just as the wealthy socialite, but as a mother, one who had lost and regained a child. You're her father too. I know that now. Alex nodded, emotion choking his words. And you're her mother. They stood in silence for a moment, an unspoken understanding settling between them. Finally, Catherine stepped back, wiping her eyes. Come on. She's waiting for you. Outside in the hallway, Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, coloring a bright rainbow on a piece of paper. When she saw Alex, her face lit up with pure joy. Daddy, she squealed, scrambling to her feet and running towards him. Alex knelt down, scooping her into his arms, holding her tightly as if afraid she might slip away. Hey, sweetheart, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Did they say you could stay? She asked, her eyes wide and hopeful. Alex pulled back, looking into her bright blue eyes. Yeah, kiddo. I get to stay. Lily squealed with delight, throwing her arms around his neck. I knew it. I knew you would. Catherine and David approached slowly, hesitant. Lily looked up, her smile faltering just a bit. Catherine knelt down, her hands trembling as she reached out. Hi, sweetheart, she whispered gently. Lily hesitated for a moment before stepping forward. Catherine opened her arms, and Lily walked into them cautiously, allowing herself to be embraced. Catherine sobbed softly, holding her tightly. I love you so much, she murmured into Lily's hair. I missed you every single day. David joined them, placing a hand on his daughter's back, his eyes glistening with tears. We're going to make this work, he promised, his voice cracking. Together. Alex stood back, his hands slipping into his pockets. For the first time, he saw something different in David, something raw, something real. He nodded once, acknowledging the silent truce between them. Lily turned back to Alex, her eyes sparkling. Can we still have pancakes with blueberries? Alex laughed, his heart lighter than it had been in weeks. You bet. Every weekend. Catherine wiped her tears, smiling through the pain. And I'll make sure there's syrup, just the right amount. Lily giggled, glancing back and forth between them. For the first time, she seemed at peace, her small world finally beginning to make sense. As they walked out of the courthouse, the city stretched before them, vast and unyielding, but filled with possibility. For Lily, it wasn't about the marble floors or the grand penthouses. It was about love, the kind that crossed boundaries and broke barriers. The kind that never wavered, no matter the odds. And for Alex, it was the beginning of something new, not an end, but a promise. He would always be there. Always. Hand in hand, they walked forward, ready to face whatever came next. Together.